Your tool's tuned up well, even you have an easy type of wood to plane, it's a dialogue with the wood. A power tool, you can just put the power planer on and it doesn't matter what type of wood it is, it doesn't matter what direction the grain's going, it will plane it. But with a hand tool, the hand planer, as you're planing, you're paying attention to what it feels like. Is it coming up easily? How thick are your shavings? There's a fine line between too thin and too thick. As you're planing it, you're looking at the wood. So if you hit a knot and one side looks all flipped up and the other side smooth, then you're going to want to come back and you're going to want to hit that grain from the opposite direction if you can. And it's really tricky to do because you need to pull it up before the grain changes direction. My name is Adam Robazzoli. I teach the theory and practice of traditional building here at the College of St. Joseph the Worker. Most often that means I teach about timber framing. So today this is a timber that we just got, we got this fresh from the mill. Actually we got about 2 months ago, but this is what it looks like. This is a rough sawn finish. So you can still see the saw marks on this timber, and sometimes clients want a rough sawn finish, so often this is what it'll look like. But on this frame we're going to be planing it. So we're going to be smoothing out the surface, and it's going to look like this when I'm done. These timbers are going to be a part of the truss for this frame, and so when I'm done with this, it should look like this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to remove any pieces of dirt or stone or sand or anything that has gotten this during transport. If the surface is dirty, that can just chip the blade of the plane. And once it's chipped once, you'll see marks the whole way down. So it's just a quick pass, and the goal is to dislodge any debris. Okay, so this is a Makita, what is this thing, 12 inches? It's really wide. So when you're timber framing, it's different than woodworking. In a woodworking shop, you bring the wood to the machine, but timbers are too big. So in timber framing, you're usually taking the machine to the wood. So this is a great example. This is as big as a planer you might have in your shop that you'd feed boards into, but instead we take it and we walk along the timber with it. It's pretty straightforward.
Try to keep it straight.
Yeah, you just go straight, go carefully. It gives you a nice enough finish. This could be your final finish. You do have to go kind of slowly. If you go too quickly, you'll see the marks. So the way the tool works, you have this blade. And so this is different than a hand plane. A hand plane you're pushing along and it's just slicing the wood. This is spinning and cutting each time it goes around, cutting. And so you'll see the shavings this makes are very different than a hand plane. It does give a really nice finish though, but usually the final finish will give it as a hand planed finish because it is slightly better. So we'll wait till the blade stops spinning before we move it. Took off a lot of it, but we still can see the saw marks. So we're just going to keep doing passes until it looks like this. We finished with the power planer. We're going to go now and we're going to hand plane the surface for our final pass. And then after we hand plane it, we'll be marking it with some lines. This is an old school Stanley No. 4 hand planer. It's a finish plane, so we're going to give it the final finish pass. And then normally once we're completely done with the frame, we'll go do it one more pass just to get all the fingerprints off, any chalk lines, any pencil lines. We'll do this once more before we deliver our frame to the client. Yeah, hand planing is more difficult than it looks. First, you need to make sure that your tool's sharp, and that can be a challenge right away. Learning how to sharpen a tool well is a required skill if you're working with hand tools. Then once your tool's sharp, you need to make sure that your plane is tuned up and everything's in the right position, that the iron's in the right angle, it's not too far out. You need to make sure the sole of your hand plane is flat, can't have rust on it. So your tool needs to be tuned up well, your tool needs to be sharp. And right there, most people have never experienced that. You know, you get your like grandfather's hand plane that's been sitting there for decades, it's not gonna be easy to use. Then the type of wood you're working with makes a big difference. Pine's very easy to plane. Oak is very difficult. It's just harder. It's going to fight you. Some of the timber framers up in New England, you know, this is Eastern white pine. They call it Eastern white butter. It's so easy to cut. It just does whatever you want it to do. But let's say your tool's tuned up well. Let's say you're using, even you have an easy type of wood to plane. You have to be paying attention to the wood. So it's a dialogue with the wood. A power tool, you can just put the power planer on and it will just, it doesn't matter what type of wood it is, it doesn't matter what direction the grain's going, it will plane it. But with a hand tool, the hand planer, as you're planing, you're paying attention to what it feels like. Is it coming up easily? How thick are your shavings? There's a fine line between too thin and too thick. This is pretty nice. As you're planing it, you're looking at the wood. So if you hit a knot and one side looks all flipped up and the other side smooth, then you're going to want to come back and you're going to want to hit that grain from the opposite direction if you can. And it's really tricky to do because you need to pull it up before the grain changes direction. So all of this it's a different mentality. It's a real material that you have to be in dialogue with. And the nice thing about a hand tool is it's giving you a lot of feedback. So you can, each stroke, you can look at what you've done, you can change direction, you can change the length of your iron. So I think the most important detail is be listening. Be listening to what the wood's doing, be watching what the wood's doing, and you want to react. You want to take that feedback and you want to change your approach as you go along. Also, the knots protrude more because it's like a stick coming out, and that's going to make your plane rock up and then not cut. So that's another problem with a knot. Even if you take a power planer first, it's generally all the knots are going to be high spots. So when you go back to hand plane, cutting around the knot's difficult because the knot itself pushes your plane up. You know, you should just grow trees with no limbs. It wouldn't be a problem. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spirit level and I'm going to place it on the timber and I'm going to see if the timber's level. It's pretty close right here. So I'm going to shim this up until this reads level. Or maybe I can move it around. It's rocking a little bit here, so that's no good. You need to make sure you put it somewhere where it's not going to rock at all. Okay, so this spot, we're actually level and it's not rocking. And I didn't have to use any shims, so I'm going to go with this. So now I'm going to make what we call a feather mark right where the spirit level is. So I just hold it in place, draw a line on either side, make sure they're straight. Okay. Then we're going to draw an X through these two marks. Okay, so this is our feather mark. We're going to snap our lines on here, and we're going to end up moving this timber. In the course of building this frame, we might move this timber into multiple different assemblies. And so when we pick it up and move it, how do we make sure we get it back to level? What we do is anytime we move this and we put it somewhere else and we need it level, we put this level back on in the exact same mark, and we shim it up until it reads level again. And if we do that, then we're going to be assured that all the lines that we're about to snap on here are also going to be level. So it's funny, depending on how you're timber framing, sometimes you'll have center lines, sometimes you'll put them on other places. We're putting them in the center because we're scribing. So it's a particular decision based on the layout method we're doing and how we're cutting these timbers. So now that we know that it's level, we are going to snap our lines on this timber. So the process here is we are going to make them a mark that is halfway across. This is an 8-inch nominal timber. It's pretty close. It's slightly wider than 8 inches right here. And so we're going to make a mark right here at 4 inches. Okay. So now we have a few options. We can use our spirit level, and we can draw a line that's perfectly plumb here. That's the quick way to do it. And so we just make sure it lines up here at the top, and then we move it around until it's plumb. Plumb means perfectly up and down. There we go. That's plumb. I'll hold this in place. So there's our plumb line. If you don't have a spirit level, you can just use a string and a rock, which is essentially what this is. And I just took a piece of wood and hammered some nails into it. But you don't even need this little contraption. You can just hold it yourself with your finger. This just makes it easy because it doesn't move. Now we're going to measure down halfway here. This is a 10-inch nominal timber in this direction, so it's an 8 by 10. So we'll measure down 5 inches, and I'll make a mark. It's called a crow's foot. Take our spirit level again, hold it at your mark, level it out. So a spirit level is really nice. Obviously, it'll do the job here. But again, what if you don't have a spirit level? What if you use the plumb bob? How are you going to make a line that's perfectly level? You could also just use a framing square. At that mark, take your framing square and line up the inside here with the line that you have. And that will give you the same line here. Then you could flip it over here and draw it the rest of the way. Either way, because we started with the plumb line, if we go perpendicular with the framing square or with the spirit level, we have perfectly plumb, perfectly level lines that are both centered on our timber. So we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. And then once we do that, we're going to snap lines from here to the one on the other side. We'll snap a line here, we'll snap a line here, or snap a line on the bottom, a chalk line. Once we do that, this is what we'll have. This is the same timber. This one's just on its side, and you can see we have a cross here, and we have blue chalk lines that are snapped across. I would highly recommend a lot of the chalk lines you'll find in like Home Depot or a big box store here. They're way too thick. So there's a company, Tajima. It's a Japanese hardware company. They sell their chalk lines with much thinner lines, or if you buy them here in America, you can just get, some guys will take fly fishing line, and they'll restring theirs with those. So we get our chalk line, and we'll connect it between the 2 points. You really don't want to walk on top of your timber with the chalk line because you'll just get chalk all over it. It's a lot easier when you have a partner on the other end, but I think I got it accurately hooked down. So now I'm going to pull it taut, stretch it right over my mark. Then when you snap the line, it's very important that you snap it plumb, which is easier. I think, of course I can do that. It's actually kind of tricky. I'm going to do my best to pull the line straight up. So what happens if it's not plumb? You get a curved line. If you snap it from the side, it comes in, and your line isn't actually straight. And sometimes you can think you really got it, but sometimes we'll go back and we'll check with lasers, and our lines will be curved. So do take your time. If you need help, you can even hold a square up to it. You can pull it up that way and snap it. You should be able to do it accurately enough without that, but when you're building skills, sometimes it's nice to have something to help you. Okay, so that's how you plane and snap lines to prep a timber for scribing when you're timber framing. I hope you learned a few things, or at least were interested. If you're interested in learning how to timber frame or learn any of these traditional building schools, please do check out the College of St. Joseph the Worker. We start teaching this to the students as freshmen, and we even have summer classes that anybody can sign up for, where you learn how to build a timber frame, cut a timber frame, raise a timber frame. So check out the link in the description below, and we'll see you in the next video.